So, very good morning once again to all of you. I hope you are all geared up for your English literature class. And today we are going to take up the next poem in our syllabus, which is Birches by Robert Frost. So, we are going to see what this poem is all about. Birches, as the title of the poem suggests, is all about certain kinds of trees which are known as birch trees. So that's how birches. Now on your screen, I have purposely selected a photo of the wilderness where you can see some birch trees. Look at these trees. These trees are the white birch trees which are very commonly found in Europe and America and also in parts of Asia. So birches is based on these trees. Now let us remember that when we do English poetry, we have both American English poetry as well as British English poetry. Now, today we are going to deal with America's poet Robert Frost and we are going to read Birches. So let's see what the poem is all about and also see something about the poet before we begin with the text. So all of you please be ready with your textbooks and also keep your poetry workbooks handy so that you can have an easy access to it whenever you need it for references. So let's begin. Now Birches by Robert Frost. On your screen you see the portrait of Robert Frost. This is a real photograph of Robert Frost. Robert Frost in 1941. This was a photograph taken in the year 1941 and Robert Lee Frost, that was his full name, was born on 26th March 1874 in San Francisco, California, which is in the United States. And he died on 29 January 1963. He was then 88, 89. And he died in Boston, Massachusetts, USA. Now Birches by Robert Frost. So let's read the basic theme of the poem first before we begin with the text of the poem. So let's go to the basic theme and what the poem is all about first, and let us have a look at the summary of this poem, which is right now on your screen. The poem summary. When the speaker or the poet himself sees a row of bent birches in contrast to straight trees, he likes to think that some boy has been swinging them. He then realizes that it was not a boy, rather the ice storms that had bent the birches. Now in America it's very cold in winter and you have the blizzards. These are nothing but ice storms, and it is because of these ice storms that these trees have actually been bent. Now on a winter morning, freezing rain covers the branches with ice, which then cracks and falls to the snow-covered ground. The sunlight refracts on the ice crystals, making a brilliant display. When the truth strikes the speaker, that is the poet himself, he still prefers his imagination of a boy swinging and bending the birches. The speaker says he also was a swinger of birches when he was a boy and wishes to be so now. Meaning to say, when he was a small boy, when the poet himself was growing up in his childhood days, he grew up basically in an area called New England, which is in the US. It's not in England, it's in US. And this was New England in those times when he was growing up, was basically a very rural place. And there used to be farms and farmers. And in fact, Robert Frost's father was also the owner of a farm which had a very large area and it was full of trees, and the birches were also to be found there. So when he was a child or when he was a young boy, he would also swing from the branches of these trees and he would also bend them. So he wishes that he could be a boy once again so that he could do the same thing now. But then it's not possible because we outgrow that age, we become adults and then we miss our childhood. So this is what the poet is also missing or seems to be missing in this poem. When he becomes weary of this world, or when he is tired of this world and life becomes confused, he would like to go toward heaven by climbing a birch tree and then coming back again. Because earth is the right place for love. Now, this poem is written in conversational language. That means very simple English, simple, common, ordinary English, so that you don't have any problem in understanding. There are no tough words, difficult words, which you may have to tackle when you read this poem. The poem constantly moves between imagination and fact. So there are two things happening at the same time in this poem. One moment the poet is imagining. He is in his imaginary world, where he is thinking about the birch trees are bent because of some children must have been playing with them and must have been swinging from the branches and have been bending them. And he too used to do that in his childhood. So he thinks about all these things. These are aspects of his imagination. And on the other hand, it is the reality. So imagination and fact, from reverie to reflection. In the opening, the speaker employs an explanation for how the birch trees were bent. He is pleased to think that some boys were swinging them, when he is suddenly reminded that it is actually the ice storm that bends the trees. Thus, the poem makes some shift of thought in its description. An abrupt shift occurs when the speaker yearns to leave this earth because of its confusion and make a heavenward journey. So he thinks about, now that he is growing old as a poet, he reflects, he thinks, and he sometimes feels that it is time for him to leave the earth and go towards heaven. And how can he go towards heaven? By climbing on top of the topmost branch of the birch tree. But the speaker does not want to die by leaving earth forever. He wants to come back to this earth because to the speaker, that is the poet, the earth is, though not perfect, a better place for going on. That is, going on with one's life. So going to heaven is probably not the right decision. Instead, to come back to the earth and live life once again is a better option. The speaker is not one who is ready to wait for the promise of afterlife. So he does not want to believe in the philosophy of life after death, what lies beyond the threshold of life on earth. There is another life waiting for you in the next world. He does not want to believe in such things, such philosophies. The love expressed here is for life and himself. This shows Frost's agnostic side, where heaven is a fragile concept to him. That means heaven is only a concept, and that concept is not a very durable concept, because nobody has ever come back from heaven to ascertain that there is indeed heaven, and heaven is obviously better than the earth. It's all in our imagination. Nobody has ever returned from the realm of what lies after life. So it's a fragile concept to him. This becomes clear when he says, the inner dome of heaven had fallen. So now let's look at the poem and let's try to understand what the poem is all about. It's a long poem, so you are expected to follow the text line by line as I explain. Birches by Robert Frost. When I see birches bent to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning. So this is all the same concept which has been explained in the summary. The poet says that whenever he sees the birches, these birch trees are bent either to the left or to the right. Instead of being in a straight line, one after another, across the lines of straighter, darker trees, these birch trees are seen to be bending either to the left or to the right. He then thinks, or he imagines, that some boy or some boys, could be a boy, could be more than a boy, in this case some boy, one boy in particular, had been swinging them. But swinging does not bend them down to stay. Now that is another problem. If a boy swings from the branch of a birch tree, he may bend it temporarily, but the moment he lets go, the branch is supposed to straighten out itself. But in this case, what he sees is that the branches are actually bent. Even if there is no boy around and nobody is holding them down, then how is it possible? So is it after all a boy who has bent it? Or is it because of some kind of ice storm? Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning. So what happens? At night it snows and the snow accumulates on the branches, and then the heavy load of the snow, you might have read about this phenomena already in the short story To Build a Fire, where the branches of the coniferous trees are loaded with snow and ice, and then when the man lights a fire underneath, what happens? Some amount of snow and ice melts, and then the entire load of snow and ice falls on the fire and extinguishes it. So the same thing could be said about these birch trees. When it snows at night, nobody is around to see it happen, but next morning when you come out and when you see it in the sunny winter morning, you find that the branches are loaded with ice. After a rain, they click upon themselves. So then maybe some kind of rainfall occurs, and then because of the bright rays of the sun, some of this ice starts melting from inside and then starts cracking. And when it cracks, what happens? They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. So what happens? The ice cracks and the wind starts blowing and the sun is shining down on them, so the temperature is rising. Eventually these ice formations start cracking and then they start falling down, and they shower down like crystal shells. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells. That means these are nothing but broken pieces of ice which look like crystals. They crack and finally they fall down from the branches of the trees, and they seem to form a kind of crystal shower, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. So down below you have snow covered ground, and what happens? From the branches, these ice crystals, they fall like rain. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away. So they look like heaps of broken glass, and somebody has to sweep them away. What happens when glass is broken? We need to sweep it. We need to sweep the fragments away because it can otherwise hurt your foot. So the same needs to be done perhaps for these ice crystals which look like broken glass. You would think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. So this is the reference which we had read in the summary also. It seems as though the inner dome of heaven, which is made of glass, has broken somehow, and all the glass has fallen from the sky upon the ground below. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed, so low for long, they never right themselves. Now what happens to the branches of these birch trees? Because of the load of ice, they are bent. Overnight they have sustained this load of ice, and now even if the ice has cracked and has fallen down, has showered down like crystals, and even if the load is gone, the branches are bent permanently. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards. And so in this way these trees remain either bent to the left or bent to the right. Their branches all bent because year after year the season of winter has showered maybe snow upon them, and then these have turned into ice, and then the heavy load has kept them down, and in this way permanently the branches have bent. So you see them in this condition forever after that. So they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. They look like, there is a comparison used here, actually a simile. They are compared to girls who have long hair and they have just washed their hair. So in order to dry out their hair, what are they doing? They are crawling crawling on the ground on all fours, and they have let their hair go over their head and fall in front of their faces. In this way, they have hung their hair so that their hair can dry up. So these birches, they seem to have the shape of such girls who are on all fours and their hair is hanging loose in front of them over their heads. So this is the comparison used here by the poet. But I was going to say, when truth broke in, truth here is personified. Truth is an abstract entity, but you can see that it's written with capital T. So the poet says that I was going to say something when truth interfered or truth interrupted me with all her matter of fact about the ice storm. So what did truth say? Truth has been personified. Truth says to the poet that it is all because of the ice storm. It has not been done by any boy. It is all because of the ice storm. I should prefer to have some boy bend them. But the poet says that I would have preferred if a boy had bent them instead of the ice storm. As he went out and in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball. So I want to imagine that these birches have been bent by a boy who is nothing but a kind of tender of cows. That is, one who takes the cows for grazing. So maybe he has gone to take the cows to the fields for grazing, or through the birches he must have progressed to set the animals free somewhere to graze, and then during his free time he must have been swinging from these branches, and that's how he has bent them. So I wanted to believe that. He says that I want to believe that it has been done by some kind of boy who went out with the cows, or maybe to bring in the cows, fetch the cows from the field where they have been grazing, and in the process of going or coming back he must have been swinging from these branches, playing with these trees, and that's how he has bent them. For a boy who lives far away from the town, he has no scope of playing baseball. Children who live in the village, they improvise their own types of games. They cannot, or they do not have any idea about the games which are played by children who live in towns and cities. So in the village, they play all sorts of made up games, for example, swinging from tree branches and things like that. So one who lives far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was that he found himself summer or winter and could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees. Maybe this entire area is owned by his father, who is a farmer. So the farmer's son, he's a young boy, and he must have gone to fetch the cows, and then summer or winter, throughout the year, in all seasons, he probably plays with these branches of these birch trees, and that's how he has bent them. One by one he has subdued or bent his father's trees by riding them down over and over again. So he must have done it until he took the stiffness out of them. What happens to a stiff piece of twig? If you keep on bending it and bending it to the extent that it does not break but it only bends, eventually what happens is it becomes softer from inside. As a result, it cannot be straight and stout once again as before, because you have been bending it on a regular basis. So that's what he's trying to say, that some boy must have been bending it from like in different seasons of the year, that is throughout the year. As a result, the stiffness is gone from these branches, and so the trees have bent. And not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. So he did not spare a single tree. He tried bending all the birches one by one throughout the year. As a result, not a single of these birch trees can be seen standing straight. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon. Now see, when you are playing with the tree branches, you are bending them down. Why do you bend? For two reasons. One is if you want to swing from them, and the other is if you want to bend the tip of the branch down and then suddenly let go so that it goes up in high speed and straightens itself. So he must have mastered the art of how to bend and how long to bend before launching out. That is, before releasing it. And so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. So this is the technique used by playful technique used by a boy who bends the branch of a tree, brings it down all the way to near the ground, and then lets go suddenly. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains he used to fill a cup up to the brim. So, how did the boy bend the branch? Well, the lower part of the tree is much thicker and is difficult to bend. So what you have to do is you have to climb the tree to the topmost branch where it is the thinnest. And then your body weight will automatically bend it. The more you climb, the higher you go, it starts bending more and more. And then as you reach the tip, you have to be careful that you don't break it and don't fall to the ground. You can literally bend it all the way down to the ground. So for this exercise, what does he have to do? He has to climb to the top. So climbing is something which has to be done carefully, and it takes the same pains as you need to fill a cup to the very tip or very edge. Brim means the upper edge of a cup, and even above the brim. Sometimes you can fill liquid in a cup even above the brim. It does not start overflowing at once until the last disturbing drop is poured into it. So this comparison is being used here by the poet to compare the difficulty of climbing such a birch tree, which probably a boy takes a lot of pain to do. Then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So, after reaching the topmost branch, does he do? He bends it with his body weight, which bends low and comes very close to the ground, and then he jumps off. He jumps off, and what happens to the branch? It once again tries to straighten itself. But if you do this exercise repeatedly, what will happen to the branch? It will lose its stiffness, and then it will remain bent and will not be straight ever again. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. So the poet says that even in his childhood, he was also a boy like that. He would also swing from the birch trees. And so I dream of going back to be, and so I still dream to go back to that age so that I can do it once again. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood. When I'm fed up with life, when I'm sick and tired of life, when life seems to be too much of a burden for me, I want to escape from this life, and I want to go back to my childhood where I did not have any responsibilities. You see, when you grow up, your life becomes full of responsibilities. You have to take so many responsibilities. So he says, when life becomes a pathless wood, he makes a comparison, once again uses a simile. He says life becomes too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it and one eye is weeping. See what happens when you are passing through an area which is full of cobwebs. What happens? They stick to your face. Many of us have experienced this, that you have entered a particular area where there are cobwebs you did not know or could not see. Then what happens? Suddenly you feel that the cobwebs are stuck on your face, and then you have to wipe them off. And sometimes when you are going through a wilderness, through a forested place, sometimes the twigs and branches sticking out from the trees alongside can cut the corner of your eyes open if they strike you in the face. So that is what he's talking about here, that life sometimes is like that, when you are troubled by so many difficulties, so many problems. So he says, I would like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin all over. So when I face such situations in life, which are like cobwebs, which are like twigs cutting open the corner of my eye, I feel like going away from this earth for a while and then come back to it and begin all over again. So what does that little boy do? The boy of his imagination? He climbs and climbs and climbs. Thus, he increases the distance between himself and the earth below till he reaches the top of the tree. And then what does he do? He bends the top of the tree till it almost comes closer to the ground, and then he jumps off. And in this way he comes back to the earth once again, which he had left earlier. So he says, the poet says, that even he would like to do something like that. May no fate wilfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish, and snatch me away not to return. He says, I wish no such fate comes to me in misunderstanding me what I mean to say. That is, I wish that my fate does not misunderstand me, does not grant only half my wish, that is to take me away from the earth. I also want to come back. Let fate understand that I want to return, not just take me away from here, but also send me back with a new life. I want to be back. I don't want to go away forever. So that's what he means. Half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love, because I realize, says the poet, that the earth is the right place for love, that is for loving and be loved. I don't know where it's likely to go better. So he says, I don't know any other place which can be better than to have life and to live here on earth. I would like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. The same way as the boy has been described as doing, he says that I also want to do the same thing. I want to climb the black branches up a snow white trunk. I have shown you the picture of the birch trees. They have white trunks. The body of the tree or the tree trunk, as you have seen, are white in color, and the branches up above, from a distance, they look blackish. I want to climb to the top toward heaven, move toward heaven till the tree could bear my load, my weight no longer. As a result, what would happen? It would dip its top and set me down once again upon this ground. That would be good, both going and coming back. So that would be a better option for me, both going away from the earth and then returning to the earth. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. So one could possibly do worse than that. Worse than becoming a swinger of birches, one could possibly leave the earth and never return. But in my case, I don't want that to happen. I want to be a swinger of birches, but I always want to return to the earth, because this is the only place where one is loved and where one can love. So with that note, we come to the end of this poem. I think I have been able to make you understand line by line. Now all you need to do is you need to read whatever is provided in the theme of the poem given in your workbook. Also go through all the critical notes and critical appreciation, the style and the title of the poem. Everything that is there in the workbook must be done. And important question, I am uploading separately here in your WhatsApp group, so that you know which questions to attempt or to write the answers. So thank you very much for today's class.